Okay, so our previous video was a little long. Let's simplify this one a bit more. So what we have here now is what I would call the blocking stage. Again, thinking in terms of sort of those classic traditional animators, this would be what maybe the keyframe animator would hand off to their in-betweener, right? And so what we have are these main poses, or key pose drawing. And think key as in essential. These are the essential poses that are necessary for a person to understand this animation, right? Because if we were watching this animation and we had, this pose here for the stretch and this pose for the stretch, but we didn't have this pose, people would not understand that this was a jump, right? Without this pose, it's a slide, right? And so it's essential for this pose to exist for people to understand the animation. So now with this blocking, with these key poses done, I can start to figure out what I want to be happening in between these poses. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I'm trying to stay on model as much as I can. So I'm just going to kind of click through these and see if any of these feel like I changed the scale of anything incorrectly. So for example, like that feels like a similar, the same character, just the squashed version of that character, right? Ways that I often think of this is I think in terms of volume. Right? Imagine this character were a vessel of some sort, like a jug, right? And this character holds 1 gallon of water, right? When I go to this pose, does it feel like this character also holds 1 gallon of water, or is this like 0.9 gallons of water, or is it 1.3 gallons of water? And I really want to make sure that I'm consistent in the volume, even if the shape is changing, right? And so I think so far through these I kind of feel like this one I'm not. I feel like this one just feels a little bit off to me, like it maybe is losing a little bit. And I think what I'm going to do is just adjust this a little bit, raise that up, and maybe make it a little bit wider, right? And so now I kind of feel like that's a little bit more accurate on the volume, right? And then again, we stretch the character out there. I did a little bit of more squash on this offline, just so we can see it. And so, just going to delete a few of those frames. And so what we really need to figure out now is the in-between frames. And there's some obvious ones, right? So I know this key and this key. That means there needs to be one more drawing in between here, right? And the same here for this key and this key. We need to have at least one more drawing. This is a good time to talk about what we would say animating on 1s or animating on 2s, 3s, 4s, right? And so we know that our animation is always going to play back at 24 frames per second. Right? We have that as our guide here in Toon Boom. You'll see I have my frames per second set at 24 frames per second. If I want the animation to go slower, I don't change how many frames per second it's at. I can't change how many frames per second a projector at a movie theater will play those frames, right? Or how many frames per second YouTube will play the frames. It's always going to play them back at a constant rate. And we've chose 24 for this. And so that means if I want something to go faster or slower, I change how many frames it takes for that to happen, right? If I want something to go slower, I use more drawings to show that action, right? And so right now, I am showing 24 drawings a second. However, what a lot of animators started to realize early on in developing animation, back in the early days of the art, right, is that when you were watching something play at 12 frames per second versus something at 24 frames per second, most times they both looked good. Right? If you dropped down below 12 frames per second, it started feeling a little jerky, a little jumpy, right? And so rather than change the frame rate, what we can do is keep this at 24 frames per second, but hold each drawing for 2 frames. And that's what we would call animating on 2s. And so as long as I'm holding this drawing for 2 frames, that means I can get away with about half of the number of drawings. My suggestion is that for quality reasons, I would never go larger than animating on 2s. I would never animate on 3s or 4s, or never have a final piece that is animated on 3s or 4s. Now, there are productions that have animation on 3s and 4s and 5s and 10s. The higher that number goes, the more low budget your animation looks. And it becomes a style, but that style is often tied to the budget of the film. So a lot of anime, a lot of YouTube videos sometimes will animate on a higher number, animate on like 5s or something like that, just to be able to get the animation done more efficiently. That's not going to impress an employer. So for you should be targeting at least animating on 2s, and on stuff where you need really high fidelity, animate on every frame. That's animating on 1s, right? So right now I'm going to cut this in half. Right? I'm going to go ahead and create me a new empty drawing in between. Right? I'm going to turn my onion skinning back on just so we can see this. And it's a little hard to see, but hopefully you can kind of see that. I'm also going to turn my arc back on just so we can kind of see that a little bit better. Right? And so now I need another drawing that allows me to go from here, from this pose to this pose, like right, subdividing that, cutting that in half, right? And so if I were thinking about this in terms of spacing, what we have is on this is frame 219, or no, I'm sorry, frame 108. We have our drawing, like, let's sort of think about the bottom of our drawing, right? Or no, let's think about the center, right? We have that drawing there, right? And then here on this drawing, let's say we have that drawing there. And so for in between there, I got these two lines, right? If I just split that in half, right, that's going to feel very linear, right? It's going to feel very, like it's just a 50% cut in between the two, right? And what that's just going to feel like is it's just moving at a constant rate, which isn't really the truth about a jump, right? If we think about a jump is you're moving further per frame or per instance, right? At the beginning of it. That's where you're moving the fastest at the beginning. So I would expect, instead of these two distances to be the same, what I would expect is something more like this, right? Where this distance is bigger, and then the animation starts to slow down at the top. In fact, I think I want to change my mind about something here just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to scoot this down 2 more frames, so we get another chance to cut this in half, right? And what I would like is, instead of it being one big one, one small one, and then we start traveling back down again, I would like this to be 2 of them, right? So we get one big one, one small one even smaller. And again, I just put that halfway in between, but I could go even closer to this one, right? And make this one, let's do it on the side, this one the smallest, this one a little bit larger, this one really big, right? And so when I'm thinking about it in those terms, this is going to allow it to feel like the character is going fast at the beginning, like it's really flying here, and then it slows down as it gets to the peak of this jump. So let's go ahead and get rid of those. Right, just delete that. And on this drawing here, I'll extend that a little further so I can see my outcome a little bit better. Oh, there we go. You know what? This would help me just a little bit if let's just try this. If the stars were hidden, there we go. Maybe even this ground plane. There we go. So hopefully now you can see that a little bit better. So I'm gonna kind of give me a marker here. Let's scroll back up to the top, just for my own guideline. I want that to be a big gap, so I want the bottom of my character to be no lower than that, right? And so, or not the bottom, but like the weight of my character. I may even go a little bit higher than that, maybe something like that, right? And so I'm going to make that sort of the center of gravity of my character. And I'm also looking at the gaps between the individual objects, right? So like this point and this point on the back of it. And those would all sort of travel a similar distance, right? So let's try to see if I can come up with a drawing that sort of fits that spacing. Right? And when I say spacing, it's the space, the distance that our character travels over a single frame. Right, so I want that big jump there. I'm gonna go ahead and still kind of keep a little bit of this like stretch on it, but I want to really try to do something like this. Right, again, I know I'm doing that like chicken scratches on here. So if I do something like this, I'm like trailing behind part of the lower body, right? But I get this, hopefully, this big jump at the beginning, right? That big gap. That like from here to here is a big gap, right? So let's subdivide that again and do another drawing there. And what I want to do, if I look back at this, right, like look at the distance that traveled there. I want to make that ease in toward this drawing. So I want this drawing not to just be like halfway between those two. I want it to be closer to this one, right? And I can do that maybe by like having my head almost there. Right, something like this, and then have the body maybe catching up just a little bit more, like. Let's see if I can. I'm losing a lot of volume there, so let's do. I'm really just kind of hunting for it right now. I think I won't. Let's try there. That looks a little odd, and it also feels to me like I'm losing some volume. Ooh, Control Z. Yeah, I'm just going to try that again. Actually. Just select all this stuff. So like where the head is, I'm going to, again, I need to get back to sort of the basics and realize that this is a triangle shape, right, of my character. So let's do, there we go, all right, and then a little bit more like this. Let's see what that looks like now if we watch it. So if I turn off my ghosting, turn off this arc path, and we go back here and watch it, say from here. There we go. So you see how it kind of eases in up at the top. And so now we can start to do the same thing as we travel back down toward this one. And again, I extended by 2 frames coming down, so I'm going to do the same there. Right? So now I get to cut that distance in half twice. Right? Turning my onion skin and my arc back on. Right? Again, I want my spacing to be biggest right before my character hits the ground. Right? And I can, if I wanted to, I could get some ideas of what some of those poses from back here. Right? I don't have to, but I can. And think about the reason we want that space to be biggest, right, is if you were to like climb up on a chair and jump off of it, right, you can't slow down before you hit the ground, right? And so that distance between those 2 points is going to be like, that's going to be the fastest you're traveling, like, but you're going to ease out of this top pose, right? So that's why we're going to have it kind of subdivided a little bit, probably even more than that. It'll probably be more like, you know, there, and then our contact pose, right? And so that's kind of the idea of what I'd like to do. And so I'm going to just sort of play around with those in reverse. I want the pose that's leading into this one, the one right before it hits the ground. And so that's where I'm going to subdivide right here. Just add a new key in there. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was incorrect. I want to do it right here. So I'll add that new key there. Right. And so this is right before we hit the ground. And so I'm going to sort of play around with like this, like almost like the foot is stretching, and then we get this shape up here. And again, I'm trying to get that sort of triangle shape, right? A little bit. And then my head, I want it to be a little bit more like that. I feel like that's off a little bit. That was close, actually. Let's do something like that. Eye right there. It's looking forward. I feel like this is maybe just a little on the small side. And I'm going to grab it here and make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And then I can sort of figure out how these two connect a little bit better. And then we need sort of the in-between between those two, right? So if I go here and just get like the in-between that, like how do we get from that? I want the head again to stay closest, so it makes it look like the body is kind of, like the head is like sort of staying here in this region as it's traveling through. A little too small. Again, there we go. eye. And then the body, if we look at the body of this previous pose, like just looking at the between these two, right? I want it to kind of feel like this point eventually has to get to here, right? So it's how would that flip through, right? And so I'm going to have it a little bit more, try to figure this out. Figure that point, this point, right? Let's see how that. And then we hit the ground here, and then we get our squash. Now I am going to have that squash happen in about 2 frames, okay, on 2s, but like in 2 drawings. Right? So I'm going to create a new one here, and what I really want is I want the bottom half of the body to get there first, right, and be almost perfect with that frame, but it's the top half of the body that is still kind of dragging behind right here. Right? Let's arc that out a little bit more, right? Eyeball, and so that means I have to stretch it there a little bit. Oh, that's interesting. I may be making that just a little too bulky. And so if we watch that jump now, right, so that's feeling just a little soft on that landing, right? And I'm wondering, part of that I think is that this is a little bit off model. Let's do a little bit like that. Maybe skew it just a touch, right? And I think another part is that this drawing could actually be just a little higher. But I also think going from here to here over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames is a little too slow. And so I'm going to go ahead and make that squash happen just a little faster and just make that happen on 1s. And so now that's going to hit a little harder, right? Same here. I'm going from this squash up to a jump, but I do want to hold this squash for a little longer. So I think I'm going to do a new drawing here, and I'm pretty much going to do the same drawing, right? Except I'm going to push the character down just a little bit more, right? Let's push the head down just a little more. That was a little sloppy of me. Let's try that again. I want to push that out just a little bit more. Apparently I can't do it in a single drawing. We'll have to kind of figure this out a little bit more. There we go. And then push the head down just a touch more. There we go. And so now we got from there to there a little bit more anticipation, right? And then I'm just going to subdivide that one more time. So if I split that in half, move this back in where you can see it a little bit better. I just need something that goes in between those two. And these drawings that are here already will really just help me blend into that a little bit better. I can't see under my pencil very well there, so let's do that. And then the head, I'm just going to cut that about in half. I think the eye, nope, the eye is doing a turn, right? And so we get this like anticipation down, and then I want this jump to happen really fast too. And so again, I'm going from squashed to jump in 1 frame there. I think I want to subdivide that. Yeah, right there. Let's go ahead and subdivide that one. And I'm going to probably keep the bottom of the body a little bit more flat like this, but then kind of reach up like this and kind of make the head lead that motion, right? In fact, I'm going to have the head arc out just a little bit here. So if we were to watch that now, let's see what that looks like. There we go. Now I think my landing here is lasting a little long, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim that off too. Delete. And I also think we get this long range here where it's just setting looking, right? Now it's okay to have kind of a moving hold here, or just a hold where we're just holding that frame. But sometimes what you can do is start to anticipate into that with part of the body a little bit, right? So I could subdivide here and for the most part keep this same drawing. But just for me, I like that that subtle motion that you get when you're still moving, or when you're still redrawing it every time. And so I'm going to go ahead and have this one, instead of starting there, right, I want to keep most of the body the same, but I'm going to move the head down just a smidge. And so what that's going to do when we're watching this is we're going to see the head start to move and then do this jump, right? And so again, that's like I'm playing with that idea of spacing, that the head is starting to transition down. Probably could even do a little bit with the eye here, something like this. The head is starting to move down, and then it goes really fast into this pose, and then we kind of settle into this pose. But I haven't done anything on the body yet here. I'm actually going to keep the body close to the same. So if I do my drawing here, I want to try not to change the body much at all, right? And so what we'll get now is this feeling like the body's staying in one place, but the head is starting to move first, right? And I'll be a little neater when I'm doing my cleanup pass. And then for these other drawings, I maybe could just kind of do duplicates of it, or even consider holding that same drawing. What you don't want is to hold that drawing perfectly and then just pop down to here, right? That pop down to there feels like a slideshow. It doesn't feel like animation, right? And so that feeling of like it's starting to move and then it speeds up and goes fast, just that little anticipate or that little ease out right there is going to do a world of difference. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time filling in the rest of these drawings just to get this down to on twos, and then we'll pick it back up with another video.